So I'm James. I'm originally from Brazil, actually. I live in London for the last 3 years. Any Brazilians in the house? No? Okay. That's okay. Well, yeah. And so I've been working with Android for 8 years. I'm actually an engineering manager now at American Express. I know manager's a bit weird, but it's trying to help the developers, and actually I have a lightning talked about that. And on my free time, I'm very passionate about IoT and continue that passion on Android. So how can we connect all that together? Now, I was going to say that we're going to talk about how we can connect your home and Android Things and Firebase. But actually, I want to add a little bit extra and go to Google Assistant also. So how can we go make the whole process, and then you can go to your phone and actually say, make me my martini when I get home, please. But before we start, what is Android Things? Who knows what Android Things is? Okay, good. So Android Things is a new form factor. It's not new anymore, but it's a form factor that Google created to use the Android platform in embedded devices. So that means you have Android running on, hopefully one day, smart fridges, smart, martini machines or anything like that. But before you reach that point, you have to create that, because this is what Google is trying to help out. Is you're just writing the software, and they maintain the OS for you. So you start with some boards like this, where the boards usually have more than you need, but you're going to build something. It's not like a phone. You're not going to create an app for the phone. You're going to create an app specifically to do a specific job. So it's going to be to make your martini, to control your fridge, to control your oven, and all of that. So you're going to have, to start, you're going to buy or acquire a development kit that Google provides, or you can actually buy a Raspberry Pi. Who doesn't have a Raspberry Pi at home in a cupboard somewhere? Right, exactly, right? So a new challenge for you is like, let's put Android on it, let's have some fun and make your martini machine and get some funds from, I forgot the name of it, some quick website where you can get funding, sorry. And yeah, so just let's build it, right? So get that development kit, get your Raspberry Pi from your cupboard, and let's build it. But what's the idea of these development kits? So the development kit will have something like this. So the Raspberry Pi isn't specifically a development kit where you could build, you could use the same hardware for the device, but it doesn't matter because you are writing Android code. But for example, if we go back on the NXP Pico, so the one on the left, yes. What happens is the board is split into two parts. So you have the carrier board that has all the UI, all the I/O things you need. So you've got USB, maybe Ethernet, Wi-Fi, all of that. But maybe you don't need that. Maybe you just need a simple I/O that will turn the fridge on, that will control the temperature and all that. So what you're going to do is, when you have that funding, you're going to go ahead and you're going to create your version of the carrier board that's a lot cheaper. Because you want to sell mass production, right? You don't want to sell 10. You want to sell 10,000, 50,000, a million, right? And what happens is the Android Things, the OS, has been built for that system on the module that goes on top of your carrier board. Okay, so you're going to write Android code that will run on the Android OS that will go on that carrier board. If we have a look at the production boards around, you could buy any of those and create your Android Things device. And also there's this kit board that is called a Rainbow Hat that allows you to explore Android Things. So that board actually goes on top of the Raspberry Pi or the NXP Pico kits, where it has a temperature sensor, a few buttons that display, though, so that 4-character display, a rainbow, so that's why I call it rainbow, and the hat means attached on top. So yeah, so you're going to play around, but we're going to go deeper. We're not going to use that because it's too easy. It's just you put it on top and you start using it. Let's go back a bit, and I'm an electronic engineer, and in my days, we used to play with wires and connect them, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to create your prototype. So you're going to create something like this at some point, right? So you're going to have that mess, you're going to have all those wires, you're going to create your prototype, get your funding, and build, hopefully one day, a martini maker, a smart fridge, smart oven, I don't know, impress us, right? Impress me. And at the moment, these were announced in CS. It's a long time now, we're almost in 2019, but these are some devices that are actually running Android Things. And how does it work? So who's an Android or has done Android app development here? Okay, good. So most of you have used Android Studio, know how to write an app for Android. Android Things apps are exactly the same thing. The only thing you have to do is tick that box at the bottom and you can start creating your app. And the cool thing is that you can reuse your code. So maybe you already have a code that connects to some platform, some IoT platform or your company's platform, and you want to create an IoT device on that. You can share that code across. So hopefully it's a lot easier way to develop than what I used to do in the old days. That we used to write it in C. You would have to create your own OS, or manage it, manage updates over the air, all of that, where Google is providing it for you. So they give you the OS, you put your app on top, and you control the hardware. You get the updates over the air through the Google, there's a Google platform for Android Things, and you just put your app in there and it will automatically update in your device. So the only thing you have to do is worry about building your hardware and your app. So quick recap, why Android Things? Now, for me, the first one is Kotlin. So I can write my apps in Kotlin instead of writing them in C or anything else like that. It's just a preference, no offense to anyone else. Better than Java, but my personal opinion also. Everything else on the OS is maintained by Google, so you don't have to worry about updates, security patches. Maybe there's some bugs or anything on the OS. You don't have to worry about that because the OS is already managed by Google, and those production boards that are available will get, I believe, 5 years of updates without you worrying about it. So you get your over-the-air updates. You have the great Android community already. It's not a new thing that you're reinventing the wheel. So you get all those libraries, so you can use Retrofit, you can use AWS framework, you can use MQTT, you can, almost everything that Android supports, you can write on it. And then, of course, you got your reusable code and infrastructure that if you have, you can already do that. Now, there's a catch, there's a difference. So Android Things is a board. You need to control that hardware. You have to somehow manage to connect those IOs. So let's go ahead and what's the difference? So on the Android Things OS, there's going to be the Things support library. And in your app, you could include that as a compile only. And it will allow you to connect to the IOs. So what are the IOs we have? We've got GPIO, so that kind of works like a binary. It's either true or false. So you can read when someone taps a button, you can make a LED go on, so on and so forth. We've got PWM, so you can control engines. You can maybe make that a martini stir, not shaken, machine turn. You've got I2C, so for sensors, specific things like that, SPI, and UART. I'm not going to go into. Did I break it? No, maybe. Okay. And UART. Now, I'm not going to go into details much about these. They're a bit complex, but in Wikipedia you can understand how they work. But let's go back to basics. So we got our Raspberry Pi here, and we're going to connect a button to it and an LED. Very simple case. When you tap the button, something's going to happen, and we want to control the LED. So let's look at some code. Let's look how we can do this. So we're going to have our activity in our Android Things app, extending app compact activity, same as Android. We're going to open our GPIO, so we're going to create our GPIO object here, and this is part of that Android Things support library that I mentioned. And on start, we're going to open that port. So we have a GPIO port that we're going to open. We're going to set our direction, so we're going to set it out and initially low, so initially the LED is off. And we're just going to, for now, just do a simple loop and keep inverting the LED value, set it, and sleep. The other thing is always remember to close your GPIO if you're not using it anymore, because if a different activity starts using it, your app will crash. You can only have one open session per port. And then, okay. Is it going to blink? Yeah, okay. So we've got our blinking LED, light, if you connect it to a light. Okay. So let's do the button now. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the button. Same approach, similar approach. We have our GPIO for the button, and instead of, Instead of using there's a miss here. So we're going to use the GPIO for the button, and now we're going to, I think I copied the wrong code. No, here we go, GPIO for button, sorry. So we've got the GPIO for the button, and we're going to set the direction in because we want to read that value. We want to read when people are tapping the button. And the active type is low because the button's connected to a resistor that's connected to 5 volts to avoid forcing the port. We want to detect both edges, so when that's variation from 0 to 1 and 1 to 0. And we'll do a callback that will set the LED to the value on the button. So now we're taking out that loop, and we're putting in the button, so when we press the button, the LED will go on. And we return true to that function to continue monitoring the events. Okay, so this is a button. Let's think about something smarter. Let's monitor the temperature of our house or device or anything like that. So let's go ahead and add a temperature sensor. Now, the temperature sensor is a bit more complex, so there's a bit more wires there. So it uses I2C, so let's go ahead and add I2C. And then you're going to go and, I have no idea what that is, how to use it. So you're going to be a bit scared of what I2C is. That's okay, because there is a repository of contributed drivers where people are constantly contributing, adding drivers to mostly the generic devices, so sensors, actuators, all of that, to make your life easier, because you don't want to, maybe you're not an engineer, you would have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how that works. So in your case, if you're creating a prototype, investigate first if that prototype already has a driver, so you don't have to spend 6 months figuring out how it works. So now let's add a temperature sensor. So in this case, mine didn't have a driver, so just show you how quite simple it is to use. So we're going to open the I2C device. So we have our I2C for the temperature sensor, the address. We're going to write a byte array. So the way the sensor works is I tell him I want this data. So we write a byte 1, and it knows that I want to read the temperature. Then I'm going to create a buffer and read it and throw that value in the buffer. So I tell it, give me the temperature value. It's going to write that in the buffer. We convert it to int, and we have our temperature. Quite simple, but again, if you look at the data sheet, you might go, oh my God, what's going on? So in the worst scenario, try and find something that already has a driver. So in this case, I created a abstraction, so you guys don't have to worry about it, in case you want to use that sensor. And we're going to read it every two seconds. Open it, and set a listener. So this is just abstracting that implementation you've seen before. But this is just a board reading a temperature, a button, and an LED. Very, very boring, right? You want to connect that somewhere. You want to do some magic. You want to have some fun. So let's do that. We're going to use Firebase, as you guys already know. So in this case, the real-time database. We're going to go ahead and create a project like we would do with an Android app. Add our information, so our package ID. Download the Google Services JSON. Put it in the Android Things module. And for this case, we're going to just do anonymous sign-in to simplify things. And let's go to the code. So we initialize our Firebase instance. And we need to log in. So we're going to go ahead and get that instance, sign in anonymously, and get a response back when it's successful. And on start, we're going to log in. Now, let's have a look at our database structure. It's quite simple. We have an object there called home with a button, a light, and a temperature. So when you press the button, you're going to get a true. When you change the value of when you press the button, it's going to change the value on the light. So we're going to have a look at that in a minute, and you're going to have your temperature. Okay, so we set our database reference, and on a successful login, so when we have the successful login, we're going to go ahead and add that reference to the database, the reference of our database. So now we've got our board, and we're going to start sending data to Firebase. We got our reference, let's start saving data there. So going back to our code that we've done before, that's very boring, let's go ahead and add the data to Firebase. So here we've got our button. We're going to go ahead and remove that setting of the LED. We want to do turn the LED from the cloud, not from the device. So we're going to remove that, and our database reference on that light object, we're going to set that value to the value of the GPIO, so if the button's pressed, true, and if it's released, false. And we're also just going to save the button state also, just for fun. Then for the temperature sensor, we're going to do something very similar. We're going to go ahead and add that value to Firebase. And if you have a look, you're going to start seeing the values changing. So you run your app, every 2 seconds the temperature is going to go up. If you put your finger on it, it's going to go up. If you put it in the freezer, it's going to go down. And when you press the button, both values, the button and light, will change. Okay, so we've got that. We're storing data in Firebase. Let's do the other way around, right? Let's start observing data changes. So we're going to go ahead and create our observe changes function. We're going to add a listener to those changes. So on data change, we get a snapshot. We're going to convert it to a home information data class. So the data class has the exact same structure of the one you've seen on the Firebase console. And we're going to check if it's not null. Then we set the LED with that value. And the LED is going to go on. Now, we're going to go ahead and we need to start observing that data when we log in. So once we log in, we're going to observe the changes. So now, if you go into Firebase console and you write true for the light, Same magic, right? It's going to go on. Yeah, take some time. I think it doesn't actually show here, that's why I have to look there. So now Firebase is controlling the state of the LED. Yeah, okay. That's fine. But we're forgetting something, right? I added that small bit of data that we're going to say we're going to work with Google Assistant. So yeah, let's do that. Let's shout at Google and get the LED to turn on. So we're going to use something called Dialogflow to manage our intents. So let me explain that more in detail in a bit. So we're going to open Dialogflow, we're going to go and create a project, and then there's an inline editor that allows you to edit your cloud functions directly on Dialogflow, so you don't have to go over all the complexity of creating your functions and pushing it using the Firebase client. So in the inline editor here, we're going to open the package JSON, and we need to add the Google Assistant dependencies here. So if we have a look at the dependencies in the package JSON, we're going to go ahead and add what we need. So we're going to add the actions on Google, so to interact with Google Assistant, the Firebase admin, and functions. So now we've got our device that's connected to Firebase. I'm going to go ahead and connect it to Dialogflow using the cloud functions. So let's read some data from Dialogflow from the database. So we have to create an intent. So an intent is the user wants something to happen. So he's going to tell a phrase to Google Assistant. He's going to say, what's the temperature at my house? What's the temperature at home? And so on. Now, you could do that using regex or some magic. But actually, Dialogflow has AI that will match several phrases. We'll use several algorithms to detect what the user's trying to express, instead of you having to write every single phrase, every single way of saying things. Because I can say, what's the temperature at home? You can say, tell me the temperature at home, and then it doesn't work. So Dialogflow is going to manage all that for you. So you add training phrases. The more you add, the smarter your app is going to be. But we're going to go with these basic ones. So temperature at home, what's my temperature at home, what is my temperature, and read my temperature. We're going to go ahead and create a fulfillment. So we want this intent to trigger a cloud function. And that cloud function is that in that inline editor you've seen before. So we're going to go ahead and in our index file for that cloud function, we're going to go and create a constant for the Firebase admin. We're going to initialize it. And we're going to handle Dialogflow fulfillment requests on it. And we're going to create an intent handler. So we have created that intent called temperature on the Dialogflow console. And we're going to create an intent handler here that will handle that intent when the cloud function is called. So we don't have to worry in our function what the phrase was. We don't care. We just know that the user wants to know the temperature. So that's what Dialogflow is doing for us. It's abstracting that. It's just calling the temperature intent here, and we're going to give a response back. So if we go ahead and read the database reference, so the same structure, remember, so we have home/temperature. We're going to go ahead and read that from the snapshot. So we've got, sorry that the code is a bit confusing. So we've got snapshot value, temperature. So we're going to get the temperature. We're going to round it up and convert it to a float. Then we're going to create a conversation and ask. I know the name ask is a bit confusing, but every time you're responding to the user, you are asking something to them. Even though it's not a question, you still expect a response back most of the times. So we're going to ask the user with a simple response, and we're going to go ahead and say something. So your temperature is degrees. I'm glad I'm not in the US, because they don't like that. And you can also show text. So if you're using your phone, it would show that text on the phone instead of Google Assistant replying to you. Now we can go ahead and test it. So right on the corner of Dialogflow, there's a Google Assistant test, and you can go ahead and say, in this case, talk to James Coggan's website. When you're testing your app, it will actually, you can say, talk to my test app. So if you've got your Google account on your phone linked to the same one that you created your project, that will work instantly, and you're just going to say, talk to my test app. And it's going to initialize, and you're going to go ahead and say, what's the temperature at home? And it's going to give you your temperature is 31 degrees. Great. Now, let's do the other way around. Let's send data to Firebase that will trigger an event in the board that's observing the data, and the LED will go on. To do that, we have to create something called an entity. Now, an entity is a way for you to create a variable and map words to it. So let's have a look in more detail just to understand. So we have a light entity. It's either true or false, so it's a Boolean. But the user can say different words to represent true or false. So they can say on, enabled, active, true. So they're going to say turn my light and that word. So turn my light on, enable my light, activate my light, all of that. And for false, the same thing. It's off, disable, deactivate. So if we go to our intent now, we're going to have switch the light. And that light word that's highlighted in yellow, you can call it anything. You can call it light parameter, LED parameter. And what you're going to do is you're going to map that to your entity. So Dialogflow is going to get that word that they said, check your entity list, and we'll convert it to true or false. Now we can send that to Firebase. So again, we have an intent handler that we're going to handle the set light intent. And we're going to go ahead and read the light parameter, so matching that light parameter we called here, right? So we've got parameter name light. And we're going to say I'm setting the light to that value, true or false. But let's go a bit beyond. Instead of just replying with a word, a phrase, let's give the user an image also. So if you're doing it on your phone's got a screen, right? So let's play around, let's be smart. So let's return an image to the user. So we got a status and our image. We're going to go ahead and check, are they saying true or active, enabled? If yes, the light status is true and our image is a light on. Otherwise, the light is off, and our image is a light off. Now we go ahead and open our Firebase admin again, and on that light reference, we're going to set the status, and we return a conversation. But now, instead of using the simple response, we're using something called a basic card. Now I know there's several of these that you can display data, do a lot of things. But the basic card is an image and some text. So let's go ahead and set a title, that image, so the address of the image, some accessibility, because we want to cover everyone, and that's it. So we've got our basic card set up, and we've got our data now ready to be sent to Firebase. So if we go ahead and say turn the light on, it's going to say setting the light to true and show you the light bulb. And of course on the board, the magic will happen again. And this works on the cloud. So if you have your board at home, like I did, and you're at the office, and you want to play around with your wife, with your cat or something, you just can go ahead and say, hey Google, turn the LED on, or connected to a fan, so I had connected it to a fan, and suddenly the fan was waking up, and she was like, what's going on, right? Or if you manage to create your martini machine, you can just go ahead and do that. Coffee, oven, air conditioning. It's all there, you just have to create your prototype now. So success, right? We can control everything across the cloud. You can have a look at this web link where there's more ideas, people are sharing what they built. Interact, we're a community. Sit down with people, create ideas, innovate. Have a look at all the projects there is. So there's a taxi, quality monitoring. There's something for the blind. And this is an old screenshot, so there's probably a lot more in there. These are just the top ones at the time. Also, I know this is a lot of information to digest. Everything's in the repo. It's a step-by-step README. I usually do a workshop also. So sometimes we do the workshop where we're actually doing that, if all of that, setting the LED, reading the temperature sensor, triggering Google Assistant at the end. So you can go ahead and have a look at all of that. Everything's documented. What is I2C? What is GPIO? What is a breadboard? So breadboard is that thing. So how does it work across? So you can just go in. It's split into lessons. So if you just want to look at the Firebase part, you can go ahead. If you just want to look at the Google Assistant part, you can go ahead. And that's it.
Great, so we have a couple of minutes for questions. Reggie has the mic ready. Okay.
Okay.
I think that's okay. So from my part, James, muito obrigada. Thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the Swiss chocolate. And
thank you very much.
We'll be starting, I've lost count of time. At 4:30. Okay, so see you back at 4:30.